Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Data as a Tool in Digital Transformation and Cybersecurity, sponsored by Splunk on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Ram Iyer, the Chief Data Officer at the Food and Drug Administration in the Department of Health and Human Services, Hannah Hunt, the Chief Product and Innovation Officer for the Army Futures Command's Software Factory, Venus Goodwine, the Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Agriculture, and Juliana Vida, the Chief Technical Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. In the last segment, we were discussing the digital transformation strategy, how the pandemic impacted it. I want to go back to something that Venus said about data. You mentioned an analytics enterprise data platform, and this is something that I think is considered, I would guess, a success story in many ways for USDA. So maybe talk a little bit more about that enterprise data platform and how it has really impacted the way USDA leadership makes decisions.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And so the success story is this. It's tied around, first of all, when you talk about data, there is no loss of data. There's a wealth of data in an organization as large as Department of Agriculture. And if you think about the number of agencies, 29 agencies and staff offices, they produce a lot of data, and that data is used by, foresters, ranchers, producers, and of course, citizen public. And so the thing around that data is making sure, one, that it's relevant, that it's timely, and that it's secure, meaning that it is authoritative. And so in order to do that, our chief data officer and his team, we established what I mentioned earlier, was the Enterprise Data Analytics Platform, EDAP for short. And that platform has created, we call them CXO dashboards, so that it can enable data-driven decisions. And that also required a culture change, because most people like to keep the data to themselves on their computer for themselves. But we encourage that, no, you can rely and you can trust the data that we've gathered through many sensors throughout the organization, and we present that data based on the need for the decision that needs to be made. As I mentioned earlier, if you're in Forest Service, or if you need to make decisions about timber, you would have to have some historical knowledge about that data. But the analytics piece of that is not only just tying in, the purchase data for, from acquisition, data, but it's also usage data. So how do you then, really coalesce all that data together and present it in a way? And we use a platform to do that so that it's visualized easily, so decisions can be made, with graphs and bars. And then you can, of course, drill down into additional data. So that's one data, and data point. And then for me, from a cybersecurity standpoint, using that platform as well to make risk-based decisions about, software that's installed on endpoints, or if a new software is installed, do I get a notification so that I make sure that it's authorized? Do I watch the type of incidents, that may happen throughout the organization, so that I can make decisions about changes in either skills, resources, or priorities. And so having these multiple level of dashboards, at our ready, executives really can look across the department and understand what they have at their fingertips in order to make informed decisions. And then, of course, knowing that it's authoritative. And so that was a huge success for us. We continue to build upon that as we continue, and really focused on even having the data to make decisions around the IT workforce, or making decisions around the value of services that we're providing. Because IT, OCIO within Department of Agriculture being the premier service provider for the mission areas, we have to make sure that the services we provide add value. And so with that conversation and gathering those needs was definitely critical in helping us to understand what to visualize and the decisions that needed to be made by the executives. So that was our success story at Department of Agriculture.
One thing that occurs to me as you go through this success story is, from a CISO's perspective, when they start to say, we're going to bring all this data together, when we're going to have a dashboard, when we're going to give people access, meaning even though they're executives and even though they are trusted, did that concern you? Did you say, yes, but we need to do it in a way that's secure, and here's how? Like, walk me just quickly through that discussion that you had, because I could see a lot of times people in your position get the get the unfair moniker of the CIO no, or the CISO no, or however we want to call you all.
Yeah, so at the risk of sounding, corny, I am not the office of NO. I'm the office of KNOW. And what I mean by that is I work with the missionaries to understand their business and their actual needs. And so the process was this: you have data that you'd like to have visualized in a platform. I ask questions like, well, what type of data is it? What is the security requirements around it? What protection is needed? Is it encrypted in transit? Is it data at rest? And so I start to put on, all of and ask the questions about the protection of the data. And then I move to, well, let's talk about the users that's going to access the data. Do they have a valid need to know? So I put in things in place like role-based access, making sure that those that only need to read can just read. And then we follow up with that by putting in audit mechanisms as well to make sure that all the countermeasures that we put in place are in fact operating as intended. So it's a cyclical process, right? And once you identify the data, I've now protected the data. Now you're using the data, and now I audit to make sure that it's used for the purposes intended. And so that was a real conversation with myself and the business owners, and of course the privacy owners. And at the end of the day, I recognize that business drives cybersecurity, and so I can't say no because we have a business to run, and I have services that I must provide. And so I try to work hard and be really mindful of the value of cybersecurity services to the business owner.
I love that, both the CIO no, I mean, sorry, Office of No, KNOW, but also I just want to point out you didn't say any buzzwords in there like zero trust. So one check mark for you, because nice job there. Let me bring in some others. Hannah, Ram, you want to jump in a little bit and talk about success stories? Maybe Hannah, I know you have a pretty good one about software.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our main focus at the Software Factory is to solve soldier problems. Whatever those problems are, we want to make sure that they have a better impact on their lives and improve that. During the pandemic, we saw a problem set that we thought could easily be fixed. So in the Army, there are these warehouses that kind of act like Amazon warehouses, where you pick your parts and you have to put them together and ship them out to all these different locations. Very, run-of-the-mill kind of warehouse work. Well, the system that does that for you is incredibly manual. It's not sorted in a way that makes sense. Soldiers are spending tens of hours more than they would normally just to get their parts in a particular order. And it hurts morale. There's been some morale concerns across the entire DoD workforce. So those types of things are incredibly important to soldier welfare. So what we did is we said, we're going to solve this problem, this very specific problem for a large group of people that do this work all across the country and internationally. And so what we did is we took a team of civilians, government civilians, and soldiers, and built an application and got an ATO in 99 days to deliver this software capability on NIPRNet, or the controlled unclassified system, that allowed them to increase the amount of picks that they needed to do in a day. It automated the process to make it more streamlined and improve that functionality. And it saved soldier hours, 12 hours per pick. They're kind of done in increments along the way. And so that's a huge boost, a huge win. And all of that isn't possible unless you have a different mindset when it comes to cybersecurity. So the level of risk that somebody is willing to take, that's the whole point of the risk management framework. But over time, it's been truncated to this very manual, bureaucratic process that actually doesn't save anything. There's this notion of cost of delay. You're delaying and delaying and delaying. Providing this capability is actually more harmful than the manual steps it takes to approve an ATO package. So for us, we said, let's automate that process. Let's build a continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline that automates a lot of those security controls, builds those controls already. So if code doesn't pass that security control, it's not going to production. And so by doing that, we're able to actually provide value to soldiers faster versus waiting. The typical life cycle of a software program in the DoD is 5 to 10 years. And so we're saying, let's get something to them now. Let's get an MVP, let's get a solution, and we can continue to iterate upon it. And that is such a big win. It's small, but it's a big win for those soldiers that are constantly fighting old legacy software and being able to deliver something to them that provides immense value.
Oh, Hannah, if I can add in, I want to say kudos to you because that is a major milestone. You know, baking in cybersecurity. We have said that mantra forever. And as a CISO, my heart is just pattering, pity patter when I hear you talk about that because it's important. And you have just really articulated the value of doing that because now you can provide products to the user when they need it in the time that they need it and moving from idea to deployment and knowing that cybersecurity is already baked in is a huge milestone. So definitely congratulations on that. And from a CISO, I understand the culture it takes in order to make that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about pushing security to the left, and that is exactly security professionals need to be a part of that scoping work to define the problem and to be able to execute it. So totally in agreement there.
Juliana, jump in because we can all kind of say great security, but it's the data that drove the security. You knew what data you had, you knew what level it was, you knew what you wanted to do with it. Juliana, jump in.
Yeah, as I'm listening, I am also smiling from ear to ear and going, yes, 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 for all of these mission relevant success stories that are outside of the IT office, but in Hannah's case, talking about supporting soldiers and accelerating. And it takes people like our speakers today and like leaders that I'm seeing more and more across the government understanding that all of that mission success can be accelerated through an emphasis on data. And one story I'd like to share, Jason, is an agency that isn't represented here today, but that we all engage with, and that's the U.S. Census Bureau. This last year happened to be their most recent decennial census. Census Bureau has been around. Well, the first U.S. Census was done in 1790. The agency was actually created in the early 1900s, but 1790. They've been doing this census thing, for a really long time. And up until last year, it was manual. We all remember the people showing up at your door with the piece of paper, the checklist, whatever. And thank goodness Census Bureau finally got leadership agreement to let's modernize this process. Because by the time the 2020 census came around, they already were automating. I mean, I got my census request and, click 2 buttons and I was done. That's a heck of a lot better than something comes in the mail, you fill out the thing, you send it in, or you open your door. Imagine if they hadn't done that before the pandemic hit. Because when the pandemic hit and we were all doing our electronic census, nobody was going door to door. They could not have executed the census last year if they hadn't moved to a modern data-driven process, in the couple years running up to the 2020 decennial census. So not only did the way they execute the census on all of our behalfs, because as we know, census results then drive decisions about school zoning and taxes and a lot of things that we all consume. So it benefits all of us for that census data to be accurate and to be relevant and valid. So not only externally for us as citizens was that data modernization important, but internally to the Bureau itself, kind of like Venus has talked about and Hannah has talked about internal business processes that they used. They used Splunk and other products and other data platform capabilities to find efficiencies in their own business. I learned something last year talking to some leaders from the census that they hire like 1 million people when the census comes around to go out to reach those remote areas that we don't often think of, and remote areas of Alaska and remote areas of the territories. And they were able to find efficiencies in those processes and how they send all those people out to do the work of the Census Bureau by leveraging data, by doing the things that Venus and Ram and Hannah are doing inside their agency. And it benefits us all. So that's a real mission outcome, and all driven by a focus on not only how do we gather data and capture data, but then use it to make decisions and take action, because that's where the value proposition is.
It goes back to the comment you made earlier about understanding the data. People understand the data. When you talk about the census and impacts taxes in school districts and things like that, that I think is much more in front of people than at any other time, because data visualization and the like, people understand, or just understanding the data. Ram, speaking of understanding the data, walk me through a little bit about the FDA and some of your success stories and how you made data work for the agency.
Sure. I really loved Hannah's expression of soldiers. We think that soldiers are only in the army, but we all have our own soldiers. in our case, the reviewers are our soldiers. And if we don't listen to them, we're not going to be successful. So my story is about helping our soldiers, which are our review process, which is our review process. You know, about 4 to 5 years back, it used to take 3 to 5 years for a generic drug to be approved. And one of the main reasons we found that it was taking such a long time was we didn't have a very good way to orchestrate how the reviews are happening within the agency. So the team put together a simple workflow system that in the next, after its implementation, the time it took to approve went down from 3 to 5 years to about 10 months. There's a very good success story. It was done in a very nice scoped manner. And then they decided, okay, this is a success story. Now, why don't we replicate it in other areas like new drug evaluation, et cetera? But they found that it was not that easy for a couple of reasons. One is we didn't have a good way of mapping the process, and we had not digitized the process. So the digital transformation then really began at that point, where we looked at our safety review and we looked at our orphan drugs, and the team went and created a value mapping for those processes and then digitized those processes. And then they worked with the technology partners to come up from developing these on a project by project model to a platform model. So we found a platform that is now able to take on multiple processes and is able to implement that with configuration instead of customization. And these two things are going to provide tremendous digital transformation for us. And we are so glad we started this journey quite a while back. Now that we have really gained some experience with that, we have created an entire capability and governance around identifying new workflows. For example, the emergency use authorization has more than increased more than 10 times in the last 1 year. So the ability to take all of that and put that into our workflow engine gives us a few things. One, it increases our speed, reduces cycle time, obviously. It also gives some valuable data. So we are instrumenting the processes from an end-to-end perspective, and it allows us to be much more nimble, much more efficient, and effective in how we manage all of these processes. So I think it's been a very good success story. So the critical success factors, I would say, is about 30 to 40% is technology. The rest of it is really understanding the customer needs and having tremendous leadership support at the top level to make these changes. Those have really helped us in this journey.
Ram, I agree with that. And that's what I hear you say exactly, is in order for us to be successful with this change or transformation requires preparation, customer input, and definitely buy-in. And I think we all will agree is we were doing a lot of this work, and when the pandemic happened, we took a pause for a moment, and then we realized, hey, we can do this. And I am pleased at how it's pushed our boundaries a little bit, right? And forced us to really to understand the art of the possible. And I think, frankly, we're probably taking on more risk than we normally would have had in the past if we weren't in this environment. And I like to say we can't go back. This is now the new pace. This is now the new norm. And so we just need to build on this and continue, because now we've proven that we can do it. And so I think these are some exciting times, for transformation and really for offering customer value.
All right, we're going to have to take a quick break. I know others want to jump in on that. And Ram, thanks for sharing the story. I think that's another great one. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will continue our conversation. You're listening to the discussion, Data as a Tool in Digital Transformation and Cybersecurity, sponsored by Splunk on Federal News Network.